Hi, this is the first of what might be a series of interviews, and today I've got my friend Will Greenhouse on, and I was chatting to him the other day, and he came out with some really interesting stuff. And the headline for this is Utilising Life's Natural Compass to Assist Your Clients and Gain Better Outcomes. I think people who just lay people will also want to make changes in their life. So we're not restricting this to just therapists and change workers. So Will's going to take us through this concept that looked a bit complex. And so he's very kindly prepared a PowerPoint presentation to go along with what he's talking about. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to let Will go with it, and where appropriate I might just ask questions because I don't know anything about this topic so far. So I'm going to hand it over to Will. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Will Greenhouse, and I'm actually an old Pain to Go practitioner as well, which I've been since 2017. But amongst other things, I've spent the last 4 years researching and developing in the area of self-actualization. And I've actually got a little book that I published in Kindle version about it. And today we'll be taking a few concepts that are from that area and that I hope will be useful to everybody because they are principles in life, as far as I can see, that are applicable in potentially every single situation that you encounter in life in one way or another.
Brilliant.
So hopefully it'll be useful to you. It's just something that I work with, so I'm going from my experience and it's been a positive one for me.
Good, and that's what we want really, is people's experiences. And I know a lot of therapists learn, different training, different training, but really what we're after is how it works and why it works, so that we can utilize that. And I think that's what you're going to help us with today.
Yes, yeah. So I'll give you a bit of an understanding with an overview. And just remember, I live with these principles, so I use it every single day. And you will discover that inadvertently you're utilizing these principles anyway. I'm just going to bring a little closer attention to how they're constructed so that it makes navigating life easier. And it certainly has done for me.
Brilliant.
So I'm going to share a little presentation that I put together for this. Share screen. Oh, shared it on the wrong page. Let's forget that. Good start. I'm just going to do it from here. That's easier.
If you go to the top bar, there's after the save bit and there's a little screen thing with an arrow on that starts the slideshow.
Oh no, I've started it, but I've got two screens on. And,
right.
It's gone on. It's immediately gone to the other screen.
All right. Okay.
So I'm just going to work with this.
That's fine. We know what's coming now.
We can see. That's okay. Well, that's even better.
Lovely.
Right. So this is utilizing life's natural compass to assist your clients and gain better outcomes. So the overview of all of this is that I believe that everything in life, our natural direction that's just inbuilt is to self-actualize. And what that means, it's to create and realize the best possible life for yourselves. So it's a process of creating your highest desires and intentions continuously, would be a good definition of this. And what's important to understand is that there is innately within us a natural direction that we all follow, which is our internal compass. So I've kind of skipped a slide, but we're going to go through 4 sections. I'm going to describe what the compass is, how to use it to navigate effectively, a starting emotional point to go from, and then the structure of what we are or what we've got to work with.
Brilliant.
So life's natural compass. Essentially, these are our highest core values in life. And they're the ones that direct us. And when we don't pay attention to them and don't organize them, that leads to a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction with life. What I came to understand through introspection and a lot of work and a lot of sort of trying to figure out how things work with the mind is that there are actually 3 core values which should sit on top of every other core values, because I understand some of you are existing change workers and understand that when you're working with clients, one of the things to do is to set people's directions properly and elicit their core values. These are the core values that need to sit on top of those generally, and they boil down to this, and you can see whether it's true for yourself or not. For me, the ultimate outcome in my life is a life filled with the most happiness.
Brilliant.
And joy.
It's interesting that you've listed those 3, because I did a technique with people where people can't usually tell you what they want replacing. You know, they want something getting rid of, but they don't know what to replace it with. And just quite naturally, I started to say, you know, I've got a jug of love, joy, and peace that I'm going to pour in there. And that's going to take over those neural pathways that used to be filled with anxiety. And the reason I gave was that these are the 3 values of where if you give it away, you don't have any less than when you started. If you give away love, joy, or peace, if you share it with somebody else, you have more and they have some as well. Whereas everything else that you give them, you know, if I give you a pen, you now have my pen and I don't have one.
Well, that's a fundamental point to remember.
Those 3 values are self-filling. They keep coming back the more you give them away. So I don't know how I caught onto that, but this is great for me. This sort of backs up something that I've been doing for a while.
And you can ask any child as well, you know, well, you can just see it by their actions. All they want to do is play and be happy and to be loved. So we've got 3 core values that I believe are the core ones that need to be at the top, and they need to be focused on. And the better your understanding as to the dimensions of how you know that these are being fulfilled as you go through every moment of life, the better position you'll be in to manage your life. So we've got happiness through joy, we've got love, and we've got fulfillment through peace. And the emotional levels, which we will come to later on, relate to the emotional level of joy, the emotional level of love, and the emotional level of peace. Fulfillment is a dimension, a feeling set through the peace range. And we'll come to that a little bit later. But just remember, I like to think everybody wants to have the happiest of lives, the most filled with love, and one that is entirely fulfilled.
Right.
And they need to be set on top and focused upon, and then whatever other core values, if you're somebody that works with core values and helping people elicit their core values, whether it's adventure they like or whatever else, they come after these. Because these 3 ones, from what I can understand, are the core motivators in life that are the clearest motivators.
Will, a few people that really strive for things are often frightened of like peace or comfort. They feel that like discomfort has to be there to push them. What would you say to those people?
From what I can see, people are not educated as to how to use emotions and feelings. let alone how to manage them from that effectively. And as far as I'm concerned, I see that all the emotions that we have the capacity to utilize can be made useful.
Brilliant.
And they can be made useful to bring about your ultimate outcome in life, which is the greatest happiness, love, and fulfillment, more effectively. So it's simply a case of, does this emotion enable me to do this in this situation? So you can use anger, you can use fear to do that. It's simply, emotions are simply energy for motion.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, I
You
like that.
can, you've got two ranges. You've got the love range and the fear range. And you've got, they're broken into different segments. We'll see that later on as well. But the simplest way that I think about it that's useful to me is to think that love draws you towards as a direction of propulsion. Fear moves you away from. And depending on the situation, those are entirely useful to maintain the self, and to be most loving to yourself and to create the most happiness effectively. It's like there's a saying that you shouldn't allow a dictator to flourish in a country. And I would say that's probably a good thing to do, because all they'll do is trample all over everybody else, which is quite disenabling of those individuals' ultimate best happiness in life, because it creates a harsh environment for them to live in.
You just raised something with me that I'd never thought of before, that the going away or going towards statement is one seems to be very apt for short-termism. Going away from something that harms you seems to be a very short-term plot, because you know, if you're going away from something that's so hot it's burning you, well, a few minutes later you've fulfilled that.
Yes.
Whereas going towards love is a constant.
Yeah. Well, going away from is going towards love as well. That's the other thing to remember.
Great thought. I hadn't tagged together.
So you burn your hand in that moment. To move it away from quickly is appropriate to do. Then you move on from the situation, and so in the next moment, what emotion or set of feelings is most appropriate to create the ultimate happiness in life.
Brilliant.
Go on from that. So use everything appropriately. It's probably the best approach to take, and really understand how you can utilize all the different feeling ranges. I had this epiphany the other day about depression, for example. Depression, you kind of curl into yourself. I've heard you discuss this in the past, and you're going into yourself and drawing away from everything else. And if you look at what yogis and Buddhist monks do, one of the first things they say when they take on sort of new disciples is, you've got to do the journey within, go within. It's an opportunity to do introspection and to understand yourself, if you choose to take that opportunity.
I think with depression, though, that it's I call it a non-learning state.
It is the way that it's used in our society.
But
we're not educated in using it.
Well, it tends to be it's a thing from when we were more animalistic, really, of play dead, because it's not a lot of people think it's sadness or whatever, but it's a lack of feelings. But it's only a lack of feelings so that you don't give a game away that you're alive, so that the predator eats you.
Yes.
And we get taught all the wrong things about depression, that, you know, we've got it for life and all these stupid sorts of things. And they've even realized recently that it's not a lack of dopamine, and all the tablets they manufactured for it that produce the dopamine, actually it wasn't that at all, but it still seemed to work. which is quite strange, really.
Hmm.
But the placebo effect is quite profound anyway.
Yes, I could do a whole talk on that.
Yes.
But
Swiftly.
we'll leave that for another time. Okay, so we have our ultimate compass, which is the ultimate joy, the ultimate love, and the ultimate peace within. So in life, functionally, the only thing that occurs in the universe are a series of actions. From that, because it's a series of actions, it's useful to break that down into two sets, cause and effect. Or for a conscious being, it's thoughts and actions. Yeah, that's pretty much all we do. You have thoughts and then you act upon them. So, and then the whole series of actions or events continues in every single moment in the universe. So taking those two core components, what we want to do is design them so that we direct where we want to go. And we use our highest core values to do that. So we do this already anyway, because what, from my understanding, is that all motivation in our lives is from emotions. Okay, whichever direction, even sitting still, whether you use neutrality for it, which is the tipping over point between fear and love, which we'll go into a little bit later, or there's another area when you're totally at peace with yourself within, that you can have, yes, that you can then sort of have, like driving a car, your forwards gears, your reverse gear, and a neutral.
Yeah.
As in terms of where you want to steer yourself.
Right.
That would be a good analogy. So ultimately we want joy. So I've played with this. This is an idea that I came across from an author called Neil Donald Walsh in one of his books. And so far I've tried to break it. I haven't been able to. I think it's excellent. And I can do an awful lot with this. I can use this. This is an algorithm that we're looking at here, and I'll explain it in a second, but you can use it for everything in life. You can reconstruct all your thinking, all the beliefs that you have running inside of you. Externally in the world, you can restructure organizations based on this logic to have better outcomes in terms of realizing what you really desire in life, whether that's government, whether that's legislation, whether it's, yeah, everything. Basically.
So for governments, really, you just replace the word money for joy.
Yeah, well, that's another big conversation that we can have. One of the things I've done is played around creating an alternative currency based on joy, and that's how you value it. And really, it's actually how money should be valued. But we confuse ourselves with applying it to gold if you're using a gold standard, which we don't at the moment. But now it's sort of IOUs, and it's much more subjective, and it's based on the people that organize the currencies as to how it is. But value is always down to how much happiness something gives you.
Yeah. When I was in management, I was quite a laid-back manager, really, and allowed people to just get on with the work and just guided the way, really. But a lot of managers sort of do firefighting and things. And I noticed that there's a tendency that managers are judged really on how busy they look and how angry they get, rather than things like staff retention and things like that, where you can measure the fact that people aren't happy working for them. Because you don't have to be aggressive with people to get them to do their best at work. In fact, it actually impinges on them doing their best.
Well, let's take that as our first example.
Yeah.
So we've got thoughts and actions. These are what are occurring continuously. In the center here, we've got words and communications. So together, these three parts make what I call the tools of creation. And starting with thoughts, when you create a thought, whether it be an intention, a decision, choice, a solution, whatever it is, whatever parties are concerned, you want to bring a fair amount of joy to each party concerned, or happiness. So what you do is, okay, hold that thought. Does this person get a fair amount of joy out of this? Do I get a fair amount of joy out of this? And anybody else, the environment as well, particularly with businesses and business decisions. You could take that into account, or your personal choices as to how you live as well and what you purchase. So you can go through this process. And what you do when you go through this is do the best that you can. And you want to gain the greatest awareness of what's going on to get the best results from this. And you simply do this by using words or communication. So if you speak to another person, here's the idea, get their feedback, then you can make a best judgment based on that feedback as to whether it's a fair amount of joy that they're receiving. Right. So it's a constant feedback loop of, this is the thought, does it bring a fair amount of joy to whoever it concerns? It may not do immediately sometimes, but ultimately it will bring the best outcome. So always keep the ultimate happiness in mind when you go through the process.
And this applies to the thought, the words, communications in your own head to yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If they're not joyful, then you're missing out on the happiness that you want in life. So how can you change that communication to a joyful communication? Would be a good question. And that's a really good way to start doing introspection, listening to those voices in your head and thinking to yourself, okay, is what's being communicated the best for me? Does it bring the most joyful result? And is it joyful in the moment? So we've got where we're going and we've got the moment. And we experience life in the moment. We want to be happy in the moment, ideally, and that to bring the greater happiness in the future as well. So you've got to remember those two parts. Sometimes you don't necessarily, you abstain from the joy in the moment, but only if it's most appropriate to bring the ultimate together. But you want as much joy in the moment towards the ultimate joy.
The thing about living in the moment is, a lot of people talk about this, and you don't want to live in the past, you don't want to live in the future, you've got to live in the moment. But I always say that you have to live in the moment, but with an eye towards what you want in the future.
Yeah.
Because you can't just live in this hedonistic sort of like, oh, I'm really having a fabulous time today. But if you're not contributing towards the future that you want, well, it's never going to arrive. So I think it's always this, I'm in the moment, yes, I'm not thinking about the past and getting depressed about it, but I'm looking towards what do I want? And it's not what do you want out of things, it's what do you want to become, really. It's about becoming rather than actually just achieving.
Yes. Yeah, which is a really good point. Whenever I'm working with people, and this is not just in working on change work directly with people, but also in businesses that I work with doing completely different stuff. It is generally a case of who and how do you want to be as your highest and best self?
Right.
Okay, so that's thoughts, ensuring that they bring a fair amount of joy as best you can, and you look at the feedback or communications or words that are spoken about it when you're examining the situation, and then when you've ticked all the boxes, you move on to your actions. And whatever actions you decide to create from the situation, you ensure that they're loving actions to all concerned. And you can simply ask yourself, well, is this loving to the other people concerned?
Brilliant.
And in a fair way.
Good.
So going back to the working example, if you're in a job and you want to get the best motivation, the best employees, you'd want to create an environment that encouraged that was the most joyful. So if people are happy with what they're doing and they love what they're doing, they're certainly going to be the most fulfilled from it and most motivated in a positive way, because I see the best creativity comes from the love ranges of emotions when you're at peace with yourself and open to inspiration.
Brilliant.
So the culmination of getting the joy and the love right creates or adds to the fulfillment or the peace within. So it brings all your three core or highest compass bearing values together in one go. And when you get used to thinking like this, it becomes automatic. We think like this anyway, but sometimes people have thoughts which are just joyful for them, but they're not really, they don't put much thought into other people.
Absolutely.
Or when they do go through that thinking process, when they act or they have their behaviors, they're not necessarily the most loving. So it gives you an opportunity to break everything down and be really granular and really inspect things as to whether they really enable the quality of life you aspire to.
Brilliant.
So that's the tools of creation, and use this everywhere. You can talk to whoever you want about it. You can use it in meetings when you're with people and say, look, you can kind of break the process down into those two bits and say, you know, are we really doing the best for everybody? And you can make a really inclusive meeting, particularly when you've got difficult people in it as well, because you're pointing out whether something is going to be fairly joyful or not to everybody as a parameter, or is this really the most loving thing that we can do in the moment? You don't have to use those words exactly, but you can talk around it, and it becomes very difficult for them, particularly as they innately know that they want to be happy.
I did a strange thing once. I had to teach customer care to all the members of the Boston College. Yes, and at first the principal only wanted me to deal with the lecturers, and I said, no, I'm not doing it unless I could do the caretakers and everybody. And I had a caretaker come along who was just sat there with his arms folded and like, what's this got to do with me? And I changed the whole thing by just saying, I want you to all moan about the college to each other. Please don't tell the principal or else I'll get fired. But I want you to moan to everybody about what really annoys you at work. Yeah. And you got 2 minutes each way, you know, and the other one has to make a note of it. And so we got this feedback. And then I said, okay, now what we want to do then is I'm going to go to the principal with all this, but I'm not going to tell them who said what. But I want you to think of how you can get over that. What would solve that for you? And then it span it into this. What's going to make your work joyful and you happy at it? Because we're going to eliminate all the things that really annoy you and not being listened to and everything else. And we're listening to you today. But we're going to start moaning first, and then we're going to switch it. And it worked really well. And they got involved with it and got quite passionate about it as well.
That's a reflection of this paradigm being used. And wherever you see sort of the best examples of things like that, you can see that it's being used just unconsciously.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So let's keep going. Right. Introduction to the map of consciousness.
Yeah, I think we're going to spend very little time on this because it is so complex. I printed this out and looked at it, and I just really sort of like, I can see this would be good, but I can't think of how. So if you'd like to give an overall description of how.
I'm going to give you a very simple understanding of this.
Brilliant.
And a very simple way of using it, and uncomplicated. So map of consciousness it's a really useful tool. It was enlisted by Dr. David Hawkins in the 90s. And as far as we're concerned, for our purposes, or the simplest purposes, is it charts the fear-based ranges of emotions, which are starting from courage downwards, and then you at the turning point of, well, just below courage, just below 200 on here, and then above here up to 1,000, because they've got a scale, a numerical scale up to 1,000, how they chart this, but that doesn't really matter. What's important is you understand the levels of emotions. So all these chart the emotional ranges that we have access to, that are pre-programmed into us, or we have sets of beliefs that are already pre-prepared for us to begin to utilize as we experience life. So we're just going to concentrate on this column here. So starting at the very lowest, if you think that it is an ascending level or ascending levels of consciousness, that's quite useful, because you can see you can see where things are and then begin to see how to utilize them from this. So we've got the fear ranges, which are these ones: pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, shame. The love ranges, which start at courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. So we know that our highest values are peace, joy, and love innately.
Wow.
So these are the ones to focus on here. Now, these are all levels of emotion that people can live in. So we can take emotions in this respect in two different ways. There are transient emotions, and then there's your default level of emotion. So we want to look at the emotions in the two different respects. You've got your default emotional state, which is the state that you naturally gravitate towards after every situation that you have in life. And it could be anywhere on the map of consciousness.
Okay, so we have an overall sort of return to almost our personality, if you like, of based in that. It's sorry, is that what you're saying?
Yes, but it's not something that you have to be stuck in.
Right.
And it's probably something that you've been reduced to because of the way that our lives are constructed, which are quite difficult in human society currently. So from Dr. David Hawkins' research, he was able to gauge that probably the majority of human society were living in anxiety and apathy.
Wow.
The majority of the human population,
which
is extremely sad.
I just find it interesting that courage and pride are on the midway scale.
Yeah.
And I think it depends how you see pride, because you can be proud of the work that you do. I would thought that would be quite joyous, but I don't know if I'm looking at the wrong sort of meaning of pride.
Well, it could be the negative representation of pride. You see, these are all tools, and they can be used in different ways.
Yeah.
So they could be used in a way that keeps you down, or they could be used in a way that elevates you,
Okay.
and elevates others as well. So you've got to be mindful of that. So that's where we go back to the tools of creation.
Yes.
That's when you bring yourself a bit of joy, a bit of happiness, because you put somebody down, for example, because you think you're better than them. And
good. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for that. Yeah.
just so yeah. So a lot of people live in these particular levels, and if you look at their natural compasses, I would say that they would want to live at the levels of peace, love, and joy. Experiencing all the ranges of feelings within those emotional ranges. So we've got, these are, each emotion that we see here is also a perspective, a way to look at life.
Yeah.
And when you're looking with that lens, when things happen, you take that perspective. So if you're happy at a party and things happen, well, overall you're happy, and whatever happens, you have happy thoughts about. But if you're not in that place, you're angry, for example. You have angry thoughts with the information that comes through to your head, unless, of course, you can disrupt that perspective and put another perspective in place, like happiness. So transderivational searches, for example, are extremely useful to move people out of a place where they're not able to utilize effectively to help themselves realize the happiness they want.
Yeah, I think because if we got all sorts of viewers, you might just have to briefly explain a transderivational search.
Easiest way to think about that is it's a moment of confusion as to, oh, what do I do now? I'm a bit confused. So this could happen at any point in your life, particularly when there are moments of trauma. People go into, oh no, what do I do? What do I think? And then depending on what occurs after that determines, what beliefs they build from that previous event. And sometimes people get stuck in loops, which are unhelpful. Other times they use it to step up.
So typically a therapist would ask you a deep question that would make you search for the answer, but it also occurs naturally within the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes. So one way to look at all the emotions, which is very useful, is that it's also perspective. Your perspective of life, your lens, your glasses, the filters that you're using. So we've got our default emotional state, which is the one that you're generally living in and you go back to. Then you have transient emotions. So that's, for example, when you go to a party, you have a great time, you're happy. And then when you come back, so that the curve goes up and then it goes down to wherever you were, if it is downwards. And for the majority of the human population, unfortunately, it's around fear and apathy.
Wow.
For a lot. Not everybody, of course.
Yeah.
But it's learning effective ways to raise the default emotional state that's key. The starting point that I found for myself, and I think other people that a lot of people seem to respect in terms of people who we class as gurus, like the Buddha, it's you want to get to a starting point, and I say it's a starting point of being totally at peace with yourself. It's the best thing that I did for myself, rather than being just generally stressed. Was to move to the emotional level of peace and simply be at peace with yourself.
Right. I think you talked about people being at a level of fear and sorry, what was the other one? Fear and
apathy.
Apathy, yes. And I think the last 2-3 years, because we've been controlled, stay in your house, don't kill your granny, and all sorts of things. I think a lot of us have moved into those states, even if we didn't want to, because we were bombarded with repetitive, here's all the problems and no solutions really.
No.
This is the perfect time for this, really.
Yes. Well, it's the inner game that's the most important game to get right, because everything is about your personal quality of life. And you need to understand how you function and how to utilize every situation to get to where you want to go, which ultimately is the greatest happiness in life. To effectively do that. So what I'm talking about here is elementary stuff. It should be, little kids should understand this and be using it every day, and it should just be, oh yes, well, I use that every day, and this is how you do it, and get on with evolving your life, creating more and more things that bring greater joy to life.
Right.
That's the way that I see it. So with each emotional level, if it's set as your default emotional level, and also each time you utilize it at a transient level, whatever emotional level you're using, there is a compounding effect, because you're adding thoughts and feelings in a moment to those perspectives, and it strengthens those perspectives, and it also spreads those perspectives out to how you deal or approach or the perspectives that you take on whole ranges of things in life. So it creates, I suppose, a larger gestalt of things, or it creates it's those beliefs then become reutilized in lots of different areas in your life. And the question is, well, is that most helpful to you in realizing the best possible life? If it is, that's great. If it's not, then you need to deconstruct those beliefs, depentuate those feelings to release you from that particular emotional state, and then move yourself upwards.
Brilliant. Good. Good. I think that's a brilliant explanation of something that just frightened the hell out of me, of like, there's a lot of words on there.
Yeah. Just keep the left-hand column, just understand that there is a progression up, and use each perspective to most effectively realize the greatest joy, peace, and love in your life. And when you're doing this effectively, that moves you up to enlightenment, because when you've got the basics right, the natural progression is to enlightenment is a process anyway, because it's a state of being or a perspective that you're utilizing constantly, and it's where you're just really generating more pure desires based on joy and love. Desires as to what you want to aspire to enjoy in life.
Great.
That's really all enlightenment is.
It was interesting, really, because I had an enlightening moment once.
Yes.
I suddenly knew lots of things I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about enlightenment, so I felt enlightened.
Yes.
I didn't know whether that meant you switched into this new mode, or there was bits of enlightenment, that you still had lots more to learn. And I understand since that enlightenment is just really a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
And that there's still so much to learn. You don't suddenly know everything. And I get great value every day from seeing the ordinary, but understanding it.
Yes.
And it's great, because I can't call myself enlightened, but I do have enlightening times.
Yes.
Sometimes lots of them each day now.
So somebody stuck in apathy, if you were to compare how many times a day or a month or a year they had thoughts that were truly enlightening, compared to somebody that's taken the time to get into the right state to really begin to create the thoughts that are really expanding.
The thing that came to mind for me, and I just had to make a note of it in case I didn't say it, is that a lot of people are sort of looking like there's a journey to get to where you want to, instead of deciding to work from there.
Yeah.
And they seem to think it's a long and arduous journey, instead of just choosing.
Yeah.
That I will have thoughts of love, joy, and peace, and not having to beat yourself up when you don't have them because something else interferes with it. But if that's where you want to be and how you want to be, it's not that you have to wait for it until something else happens.
No,
Yeah.
you can get into it transiently, or you can set it as your default.
Yeah,
And it's just a perspective.
my life changed from a couple of things really. One was not giving a damn what anybody thought about me. It was
Yeah.
a wonderful way of bringing peace, really. But the other one was I chose to have unconditional love for everybody on the planet. And
Yeah.
I don't mean I have to like what they do, but I recognize that it's just a fellow human doing the best with how they were born and all the skills they got and the parents they were born to and the circumstances and things that have happened to them since then. And just having that unconditional love, it just makes life so much easier because I'm not so critical of people now or judgmental or whatever. I just see them as that's how they are. And
Yeah.
I accept that.
And that's a belief that's elevating for everyone.
Yeah, and it didn't take any getting. I literally decided to do it,
Yes.
and then that was it. I was doing that.
That's always as it should be.
Yeah.
Your personal choice. And then, yes, if you're lucky enough to be in your position so that it just sets in place and then grows. A lot of people try to make the choice but can't get it to stick. These are the ones that therapists work with to try and unlock in whatever way.
And I'm very fortunate in being a therapist that the more I work with people, I don't take their problems off them and absorb them myself. I actually get rid of the same problem in me.
Yeah.
So when I realize why people are running some terrible programs, and I help them release themselves from it, it also goes from me.
Yes.
So I realize it's not difficult to let go of anything. It is if you think it's helpful to you.
Yes.
So you're doing an internal sort of contradiction. I
Yeah.
need to let go of this, but if I do, I'll fall to the ground
Yeah.
and die. And really, you're only 2 inches off the floor. If you let go of it, nothing bad happens. And it's just understanding for people that if you think it's going to be difficult, it's going to be difficult. And if you think it's going to be easy, it becomes easy.
And this is the art of where all change workers, really would want to excel
at. Absolutely.
Finding those points and help moving past them.
And you don't have to have sorted all your own problems out before you work with people.
No.
In fact, sometimes you're coming from a similar level to them, so it's easier to guide them and say, "Oh, I've done this last week."
Yeah.
You can guide them to how they can help themselves. But like I say, it affects you as well because it's almost like a universal truth. You give them a universal truth for how life can be, and when they see it, it changes them, but it also changes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you only need to be one step ahead.
Oh, absolutely.
Light years ahead. And then if you're in the process, I mean, most of the time that I've done coaching and stuff, I'm learning on the way when I'm doing it. So I'm just enough ahead to get people up, and then going through all the thinking process as well, really examining the thinking about everything that you're taking them through as well, which is always very useful.
But it's looking forward. It's you see a lot of people chew over their problem, and I think we chew over solutions. So I think that's the difference. We're not looking at things as to go, oh, poor me, I've got this problem. We're actually going, well, I've got a problem and it's really annoying me. So what's the solution to it? And I think that's just a slight change, but it's a massive change in how you proceed down your structure of things. Yeah.
Right, I'm going to move us on quickly just for the last couple of bits.
It leads us nicely into this next.
Yeah. So the key question is, what is the structure of what we're working with? And then the better, from what I can see, the better that you understand the system, the more opportunities you can create to interact with the system and make changes in different ways to get things done, which is always a good way of always offering flexibility, because there's never the same situation exactly that you have to deal with.
Yeah, no.
So firstly, I found it useful to look at all of life as a system. It's a large system in which we're a subsystem.
Yeah.
And a useful definition of a system is in the dictionary, it defines systems as an interconnected network.
Yeah.
It's one really useful definition. The other really useful definition that's in the main dictionaries is that it's a machination. System is a machination, so it's yes, it's a mechanism.
Yeah.
So
and it helps us to spot the patterns in things, doesn't it?
very much so.
Although the circumstances are different every time, the patterns are usually very, very similar. And if we can see ourselves dropping into an old pattern, we can just reject that and say, well, this isn't helpful. Does this lead me to joy? And we can go back through your process there of shifting from where we think we're going, or we thought we were forced into going, or we would automatically arrive there, into that's not the destination. I'm going here today.
Yes. Yeah. And from that, if we look at everything as a mechanism, as a system, then a mechanism and a system, they have a structure, and the structure is maintained, and it has to adapt to the environment. In fact, you could consider a successful system, well, for me, a successful system is one that's able to evolve, which could be to gain in complexity, and a system would show the capacity to be functional in what it does. It would need to be adaptable, because there's the environment to consider. It's always changing, and it needs to be sustainable. And those are good principles as far as I can see in life as well when we approach all of this. So in terms of being a system that is structured, it's structured in a way that it must result from some kind of programming or some kind of logic which maintains the system. And we can use that definition to say, for us as conscious beings, we have beliefs that are the programming for the system.
Yeah.
So beliefs are affected by the environment. In fact, all the data from events in our lives that we receive through our senses is processed by a set of programming which outputs consistent outputs, which are our thoughts and our feelings. So thoughts structure what reality we create of the situation, how we perceive life actually is. And then we have a direction that we go, which is really driven through the emotions. Which brings me on to this, which again may seem a little bit complicated, but I just wanted to make people aware of this, that there is a causality loop, or basically, if you move around the circle of this, this goes to form what we call being. Being is I am, and starting from there. And when you start to examine yourself from there, you go, I am this, I am that. And that grows in greater complexity with life, because through every experience, we're layering on new understandings of the situation that add to the beliefs or add to the programming that expands. And if we have a stable set of beliefs or programming that helps us interact with the environment effectively, is able to sustain us, and is functional, then that's what we want.
Yeah.
And to expand, we want to expand on more experiences that create happiness, love, fulfillment. So your state of being in a moment will be determined by a set of what we call perspectives. So these are how you view life. And one of those filters will be the sets of emotions that you're utilizing in the in the moment. You'll have your default level of emotion, and then any transient or appropriate emotions to the situation. And they're all the result of prior programming. Everything up until that particular moment. So every time you utilize your perspective, it outputs thoughts and feelings, or your understanding of the situation, which are perceptions. So perspectives and perceptions are all beliefs or sets of beliefs, but attributed to different parts of this process. And this is very useful to understand when you're doing change work with people, or understanding yourself as to how you view life and how you are designing how and who you want to be as a person. So we've got beliefs here, which with the perspectives and perceptions that we have in a moment, that fundamentally draws together an ultimate set of beliefs that produce the behavior or the actions that we take.
Yeah, and that would be based on repetition as well of those perspectives and perceptions.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. So then we have events. Events just occur because we live in a universe where there are just sets of actions always occurring. So from an event, we take data. And that's all the information that comes in through our senses. And in the processing of that data, we determine the truth of the situation. And what that means is that the truth is, does what we've seen, heard, felt, whatever, correlate to the perspective and perceptions that we have, and ultimately our state of being. So it's a feedback component to all of this, and depending on that, results in the thoughts that you have and emotions that come out as a result of all of this interaction that occurs. And from the thoughts and emotions, that determines the experience you have in the moment. So once you've had an experience, that locks in, and that those are your memories, and they are the build-up of your being, your I am, this, that, and the other, expanding. And essentially, that creates your reality. The key thing to understand about reality, whether you're considered crazy or not, is whether the reality that you have is functional in taking you to who and how you want to be ultimately. And I would look at it just in that perspective.
That's a great map there of how we are. And people sometimes focus on the wrong bit. They look at the sort of reality, and having dealt with thousands of people, they come in with this reality that's not the reality that I can see in them, but it becomes their reality, and from their perspectives and everything else. And so we've got to go back to the beginning, haven't we, and look at their perspective and perceptions and beliefs. And
you can interact anywhere here.
Yeah, but what I've seen with, because I help people in one session usually, so I'm looking for a thing I call an aha moment. I've never found a better description of it yet. It's almost like enlightenment, but it's sort of like they suddenly realize the truth from what belief they have isn't the truth. And as soon as they have to go, well, actually, that's not the truth. That's the opposite of the truth. Here's the truth. there's something happens in the brain and it changes, and the
Yes.
wiring's still there. It has a different outcome.
Yeah.
And that's what I always look for a client, is this aha moment. And I knew when I got that they not only changed, but it was permanent, because
Yes.
you can't go back to something that you now knew was a lie as though it's true still.
Yes.
And so we do end up changing the perspectives, perceptions, and
Yeah.
beliefs.
Truth
And,
is a really
and it's
useful
that
tool.
bit that changes the behavior, and the behavior changes the events.
Yeah.
And they look at the data differently and they perceive it differently. And the truth becomes a better truth because it's more like what most people would see as the truth instead of their distorted version of themselves.
Yes.
And then you don't need such high emotions, negative emotions, to do something about it, because you're not wanting to alter something that's bad.
Yeah. Well,
It's a
yeah.
marvelous
Yeah.
layout there.
Yeah. This I found, again, this is from Neil Donald Walsh. This is in his book, When Everything Changes, Change Everything. But I'd not seen this before, and it's been tremendously useful
Right.
for me. And this whole loop is something that we go through in every moment in time. So in a moment in time, we go through this. We have the perspective, perceptions, beliefs, behavior, events, data, towards the next, truth, thoughts, emotions, experience, reality. Feeds back into being.
Yeah, brilliant.
Are you being the joy that you want to be?
This has been great, Will. So, it started off looking sort of really simple, but how do you do it? But now I think we've had it explained. It's very easy to see how, from changing your perspective, changes everything else.
Yeah.
And we have to overcome this thing called cognitive dissonance, which is just really, if you have a really strong belief like religion or
Yeah.
politics or whatever, it's very difficult to change it, because people then get locked into it. But we all need to look at anything and everything that's not serving us,
Yes.
and to say, well, okay, could there be room for doubt there? Could I not be looking at this from the right angle, or could I
Yeah.
be looking at it too black and white?
Yeah.
Could there be a lot of grey in it, or whatever? Could
Yeah.
I move away from this? Would it be difficult to move away from this? And obviously, most people, if they find a good therapist, I mean, therapy has changed dramatically. It doesn't take years now to solve people's problems.
Yes.
With things like NLP and hypnotherapy and so on, a few sessions or a few hours worth of help with somebody usually can make a dramatic change in you, because
Yeah.
they're not changing you, you're changing yourself
Yes.
based on this openness to learn new things, understand things, and also go introspectively, but to what can I learn from that and move on?
Yeah.
Not, oh, I did that wrong, or somebody else was to blame, or it's not about that. It's just, how can I develop myself? What can I do for me?
Yeah.
And I'm afraid we're all taught to be, and not to be selfish in things. So we don't look at sorting ourselves out.
Yes.
And if we don't sort ourselves out, we can't help anybody else very well.
Yes.
So we should all be looking at, how can I be the best me I can be and live in love, joy, and peace.
Yeah.
And I do that now. I can tell you, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't get any less problems than anybody else that come along and bite me. But I very quickly move on from them into, well, that hurt. How do I stop that happening again?
Yeah.
And it's a lovely way to live. And I
Yeah.
just live each day in joy. So it's just
Yeah.
fabulous to see it, and understand my own journey of getting there, really.
Yeah. For me, this has been really clarifying on something I learned a long time ago from um, was it Richard Hawkins, The
All
Selfish
right. Yeah.
Gene. I don't know if you've ever read that book,
Oh,
but
sorry, just give me the title of the book.
Richard, The Selfish Gene.
Selfish Gene, yeah. Now,
I remember reading that years ago, but one thing stuck out to me, and it's with this whole issue of, are you service to self, are you service to others? It's all a, generally I see it as a lower level understanding of the truth in all of this, which is this: we're always in service to self.
Yeah.
We should always be first. But when you understand that there's your own inner environment, and then there's the outer environment, and you understand that if you create the whole environment in a way that you want it designed, so joyful, you know, you've got to be in service to others as well as yourself, but not to the detriment of others or the self.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's how there can be true altruism, which is what was discussed in The Selfish Gene, how there could be true altruism.
It's a brilliant book, but I suggest people don't buy it.
Yeah.
I suggest they get a
Quite
summary
limited.
because he puts forward very good ideas.
Yeah.
But he hammers it to death over hundreds of pages. And I think if you've got a summary of the book, you probably learn just as much as reading it.
Yeah.
But it was a very good eye opener for me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, much of the thinking has evolved since then.
Yeah.
Is probably the best way that I could put it. But there are a few grains in there which are really useful.
Yeah.
Or have been defining for me anyway. I still think
it's a good starter to see that, you know, it was almost like risking your life for somebody else. Why would you do that? And he explained it fully, and it was really good that it wasn't just about us, it was always about the community as a whole and the species, really, that were designed to make the species live on rather than just us. And if you think about it, you know, what's the point in having a species unless we actually do something with this life? Because we're only getting this one once.
Yeah.
We might come back as something else, but, you know, you're here having a human experience. Just make the most of it.
Yes.
You know, I'm 70 now. I still think I'm about 30. And I've only been doing the last 12 years, and it's been the most exciting and wonderful time of my life. And I actually look forward to getting older each time. It's just great. It's just fabulous to be alive in this day and age.
Since I've met you, you've been doing amazing work.
Yeah, thank you.
And so do you.
So, unless you've got an overall wrapping up, I think we've got to where we need to be with this. And I'll put things in the footer of where you can contact Will. And I think we might continue this discussion another day and go into a little bit more detail of some aspects of it. So thank you so much, Will, for being my guest today, my first ever guest.
Thank you very much. I'm honored. And if anybody's got any questions, feedback, just post them through, and we'll see what we can do to answering them, whether it's a little chat or whatever else.
Brilliant.
Yes, and hopefully there'll be good questions and really confuse us and confuse me. So I'll have to do some thinking, which I enjoy.
This is the thing when I'm interviewed. I always say, don't tell me the questions in advance, because I'd rather my unconscious answered it than my conscious. Anyway, you've been brilliant, and I'm just going to turn the recording off. So thank you, Will. That's been excellent.
Thank you very much.